and raised in northeastern Pennsylvania. I am happy, my mom still lives in Clark Summit, right outside the lovely city, can we call it, of Scranton? What's the old joke? I spent 2 weeks in Scranton one day. I know that region well. I still go back. My mom's going to be 95 next month. She still lives in Clark Summit, in the house I grew up with. I grew up in. I went to Abington Heights, if you guys know any of these. I'm a comic. My sisters sent their kids through Scranton Prep and what was then Central High School. I believe now they only have Scranton High School. They combined all the high schools in the city. But there's good work actually going on in Scranton, very relative to what I want to share with you today. One of the things I'm doing, one of the 4 stakes that are the president of our university has placed in the ground, that's his metaphor, is community engagement. And my work with the statewide PBIS initiative in New York State is probably best exemplifies my commitment to community engagement, genuinely partnering with school districts, state education departments, school districts, and individual schools, as well as individuals at the regional level in what we refer to as BOCES. So I want to talk with you briefly today about what my engagement there looks like. You can't talk about PBIS without showing the ubiquitous triangle. So just as a little bit of background, we know that PBIS is a 3-tiered framework for providing differentiated supports, behavioral supports to children in need of differentiated intensity of supports. And on Tier 1, we have strong school and class-wide management to support the pro-social behavior of all students. I could do a day and a half on that alone. Small group strategies at Tier 2 or secondary prevention are provided for those students with moderate behavioral supports for whom Tier 1 supports were insufficient. And intensive interventions such as FBA and wraparound are for students with the most significant behavioral support needs. 80, 15, and 5% vary quite a bit. You'll see actually 1% of youngsters in some schools who need red zone supports. In schools with high poverty, you'll see higher than 5%. But those are rule of thumb statistics. It is mandatory that if you join the cult of PBIS, you have to have some version of this triangle tattooed to your left ankle. I have it as a magnet, I have it as a keychain. And this is the other tattoo that goes on the right ankle. It's the 4 essential elements. It starts with practices, things that we do to support students. Something that if you study with me or work with me, now that you're listening to me for a few minutes, I don't go long without saying I have the firm belief. If we believe that all students can learn, do we all believe that? That little platitude that every student I ask to write an educational philosophy puts in the first paragraph of, right? All students can learn. Then I have to also logically follow that, therefore, students don't fail, interventions fail students. And if the student's not making adequate progress, it's because we haven't created the right environmental conditions to support that outcome. We haven't selected the right goal, the right objective, and created the conditions because we believe that all students can learn. And later on, all right, so in PBIS, one of the 4 essential elements, of course, is evidence-based best practice that we deliver to students. On the other hand, we also talk about the need. I also then follow up by saying, I am a big supporter of teachers. I think teachers are good people who are motivated and want to do good things for kids. So I often will follow up, students don't fail, interventions fail students with teachers don't fail, systems fail teachers. Right? Because I don't think that teachers are dragging their heels and don't want to do and are reluctant to change. And right, we have to create the conditions around them that allow them to deliver the interventions with integrity, so-called implementation science. So the second essential component of PBIS is, of course, systems. And the third is data for making informed decisions so that we're not shooting in the dark. Data systems is a heavy lift. Lots of educators believe that their impressions should be sufficient. Why do I need data to confirm what I already know? Creating these data systems, using these data systems, putting them in the hands of leadership teams who know how to make data, use data to define problems and create action plans to resolve those problems are all professional development outcomes that we're trying to promote. And only when you get the intersection of those three things do you get better outcomes for kids. Right? So those are the two essential, again, this one's on my right ankle, the triangle's on my left ankle. I am partnering with the New York State PBIS Technical Assistance Center that's providing technical assistance statewide for the New York State Education Department's role like PBIS. That Technical Assistance Center is housed, I think Chuck just left.
Yeah.
And the local BOCES, the superintendent of that BOCES was here a moment ago. It's an awarded contract that BOCES competed for and was awarded. Part of that contract is I signed on initially for minor roles, and it's been a vacuum that has sucked me in over the last few years. But only because I'm really interested, really committed to making it work. The goals of the Technical Assistance Center are to provide ongoing PD and TA to regional behavioral specialists who are the change agents within the schools within their regions. So we're providing PD and TA to the people who provide PD and TA to the schools. We're going to evaluate the extent, and I was initially hired mostly as the evaluator of this project, but I have since gotten involved in all the goals. Evaluate the extent to which PBIS is being implemented with fidelity in the schools and its effect on important outcomes for kids, academic and behavioral outcomes, in a reasonably rigorous evaluation. Develop and regularly update a web-based library of evidence-based practices. I was tagged for that one too. Who wants to read research but us academic types? And develop and disseminate common professional development curriculum. This is the one I really got pulled in on. We are 3/4 of the way through a subcommittee writing that what we hope one day will be the state vetted official FBA, what we call here BIP, what you may call BSP in Pennsylvania. I don't know which term do you use? Behavior support plan or behavior intervention, behavior BSP. So that we get continuity in professional development. In New York State, it's interesting when you go out to do PD on FBA, functional behavioral assessment, you get as many questions about compliance with regulations as you get with questions about implementing the model with integrity. Right? The regulations are a guide to support implementing the model with integrity. But that's understandable because that's what practitioners, they get held accountable for compliance with the state regs. I don't know if you guys deal with that here. We've created and vetted a tier 1, what we call new tier 2 team training for PBIS. We're working on tier 2. I'm also have written the wraparound training for tier 3, which I will be teaching to the behavior specialists next Tuesday and Wednesday at Cap Region BOCES. My background, by the way, is I have a career-long interest in children and youth with emotional behavior disorders. I was principal of an alternative school in Washington, D.C., trained by a gentleman named Nick Long, if that means anything to anybody. I had another career before I joined the Ivory Tower. In my mid-30s, I decided I needed a job where I talked about kids with emotional behavior disorders instead of working directly with them. And so I made the switch, but I was a self-contained special ed classroom teacher in inner city DC for a number of years. I then worked at the alternative school called Rose School in DC, and later was the principal of that program before making the transition to higher ed. New York is divided up into 10 regions. These are called Regional Special Education Technical Assistance Support Centers, and they are multi-component. Cap Region BOCES houses the center for, all right, so this is from the Catskills to Canada. It's a big region, right? And that's one of the issues we're having. There are a number of supports to improve implementation of special ed services across New York State. Everything from RTI to speech and language. It's a technical assistance group to support implementation, integrity, of special ed supports within schools across New York State. The behavior specialists with whom I work on the PBIS initiative are housed in these regions. Currently, there's 28 of them. We started with 14. We doubled. Eventually, there will be 40. It's a shame Chuck's not here, so I could say, however, the Technical Assistance Center has not grown commensurately. So where we used to support 15 people, we're now going to be supporting 40. So most regions will have 2 to 3 behavior specialists. And we've added the idea that we're now going to provide technical assistance to early childhood programs, probably using the teaching pyramid model out of Mary Louise Henneter and Lise Fox, and I can never remember the name of their center. It doesn't roll right off the tongue. It has a bunch of letters that are, but they've developed a wonderful early childhood PBIS curriculum that is non-proprietary. So this is our constituency as a technical assistance center in the state. We provide them with PD and TA. As they provide PD and TA to districts and schools, we support additional districts through regional training. So even if they're not working directly with the school a couple times a year, we invite individuals from the entire region to attend trainings that the TAC and the behavior specialists offer collaboratively. And the behavior specialists choose the districts and schools they work with based on things like disproportionality of outcomes, trouble and special ed outcomes. There's a list of indicators that we believe PBIS might be able to help at the earlier rate, and that's how schools get prioritized within a given region. With the evaluation, we have a couple questions to professional development and TA provided by us, provided by the behavior specialist, result in implementation of PBIS within schools. Do they do it with fidelity? As we know, we collect 2 types of data in PBIS, kid outcomes, but also how are we doing implementing the model? They're both equally important and necessary. If schools implement PBIS, are they able to sustain it over time? Do kids benefit all kids benefit academically and behaviorally? And what we mean by kids with complex needs really is kids with IEPs, because our funder, interestingly, comes out of the State Office of Special Education. It is IDEA flow-through money paying for the statewide PBIS initiative, funding all of those behavior specialists. Makes for an interesting dynamic, right? Because PBIS is not special ed specific, right? And if you're interested in talking about, how when you're knee deep in something or eyeball deep in something, and you can really see the nuances. The fact that we're funded by special ed has some interesting effects. That's our schedule of data collection. I think it's important to note that in the evaluation, we added only 1 new instrument about demographics. All the data that we're collecting to evaluate this initiative are data that the school should be collecting as part of their PBIS implementation anyway, integrity data and kid outcome data. We're just asking them to send it to us so that we can aggregate it. One of the most profound data points that I'll show you in a minute is getting those data. It's data to learn that getting those data are hard. It's hard. It doesn't come easily, as you might think. These are from 2014, 2013 data are now sitting with the state, and I wasn't permitted to, it hasn't been approved yet for public consumption. So I'm sharing with you our 2014 data. The number, type, and percentage of schools that the behavior specialists are working with currently. Who's submitted, in the blue boxes are the data inputs we're trying to collect. And on the other side are the percentage of behavior specialists back when we only had 14. So in 2 years, we've grown from 14 to 28, and shortly we'll go to 40, which creates all kinds of, so we've got people who have been doing PBIS in New York State for 10 years, and we got people who got hired last month and are learning the ropes now. That's our constituency as a technical assistance center. And you can see that on some very important outcome measures, we're getting really modest compliance with data submission, right? And what our behavior specialists are telling us is it's not that schools are collecting data and refusing to give it to us. Part of their heavy lift as a provider of PD and TA is to get the schools to collect the data and use the data. They're inundated with RTI data. They're inundated with data systems that they use for their own state reporting. PBIS has its own unintegrated data systems called Swiss and ISIS, if any of you are familiar with those. They feel like it's redundant and they have multiple data sets and they can't, those are all issues we're trying to deal with. We've tracked the number and types of PD sessions that they've supplied over time. Probably one of the biggest things that we've learned and are consistently working on is we're encouraging, in fact, strongly wording, not only from the Technical Assistance Center, but from the state itself, that there should be no provision of professional development without a plan for ongoing technical assistance and coaching. We know the literature on effective PD. We know one-shot deals don't work. I don't care how good you are at doing workshops. If you're not in the school acting as an external coach, being a change agent, gently, kindly, respectfully nudging them forward in implementation, you get posters on the wall in school saying they're doing PBIS, when in fact, maybe they're not. That doesn't happen in your state, does it? We collect self-assessment survey. This is filled out by all the teachers in all the buildings being served, who rate the extent to which things are in place. And you can see again, 2 years ago, this is a couple years in, we've been at this a couple years by 2012, that their perceptions of whether something's in place, partial or not. When you add up partial and not, you get some pretty significant numbers. And you can see that they're still the most stressed by the most struggling students. Right? They still feel most overwhelmed by the kids who present the most challenging behavior, which is a particular interest of mine. I spent a long time figuring out how to get along with children and youth who, by definition, are really hard to get along with. You can also see these are the benchmarks of quality is the tool we use to assess implementation fidelity of PBIS. It's filled out by the Tier 1 leadership team within the building. You can add people on if you want. And you can see again that the only item in 2012 that was at fidelity was, we have a team. Right? And you can still see, you can take a look and see in what areas. Now you can see this as the cup half full or half empty. We see it as a progress that was data in and of itself to put this in front of the behavior specialists and say, what's your job? What are you trying to affect? How can we support you in doing it? Right? We have some behavior specialists who generally thought, my job's to do workshops. Right? That nitty-gritty, relationship-oriented, get out to the schools, connect with people, sit in on their leadership teams, be a change agent in that building. The stuff we know about coaching, the absolute necessity of coaching to move professional development forward is where a lot of our technical assistance to the behavior specialist has focused in recent years. This is the model we've adopted for that, the sort of no PD without a TA. There are two models. Some school districts have PBIS infrastructure and some don't. The district does. And so there might be an external coach within a given district. Our behavior specialist can partner with that person, and that person becomes the change agent in the school. If that person doesn't exist, the behavior specialist becomes the change agent, the so-called external coach. But either way, somebody has to do it. You can't do the PD, we have great curriculum, we have great trainers, and then say good luck. Happy implementing. You gotta do that technical assistance, coaching follow-up, and move the initiative forward, or we'll never move those data points we were just looking at. This is, we borrowed the the red zone, yellow zone, green zone supports. These are the, when we're a little bit of the behavior specialist time should be doing generic things for a lot of buildings, a little more intensive support for some. When you're working with a district that has their own capacity to support implementation, you can have a few more of those schools, but when you're the external coach, you can only have a few schools, because that's time-consuming, nitty-gritty work. So we're trying to work with the behavior specialists to calibrate how they should be using their time and what they're doing. We're taking a good hard look at implementation science, the work of Fixin and Blase. I really want to call her Blaze. I hate calling her Blase. Apparently that's her name. So I'll call her that. Right, and so really what we're taking a look at, what we're really trying to tease apart, deconstruct, and help the behavior specialists think about is that those stages of implementation, that when you're in exploration, and you're exploring it, you have to work with that school system on, do you have the systems in place, do you have the data in place, do you have the practices in place at the exploration stage. And as you move through each of these stages, you have to systematically keep your eye on each of these 3 targets as you move through each of those stages, as you support a school through that arc of implementation from 1 to 5 years out to where the thing's humming in the building and becomes relatively self-sustaining. We have precious few of those schools here in New York. PBIS has already gotten a bad name. We tried it, it didn't work. It's already stigmatized because it was done with a lack, came with all this promise, didn't get implemented with fidelity, didn't deliver the promised outcomes. And so we actually have, PBIS is nothing but a theoretically sound framework for providing differentiated supports. It's not a curriculum, it's not an intervention. It's hard to argue that it ought not work. It's theoretically sound and it's evidence-based. I think practitioners really struggle to get a handle on it and to fit it into the repertoire of everything that's overcoming. So that is essentially, I'm engaged otherwise locally here in Albany in a few ways, but that's really the primary manifestation of my commitment to I probably will never publish all from this. The evaluation data aren't that rigorous. I don't have there's some dirt in the data and the way they're coming in. I think they're functional for our internal purposes. I shouldn't say that we've actually already done a few posters around the country, but I don't think that these data will ever, so it's not, I don't really think of this as my research. I think of it more as my, and it fascinates me, right? It's no easier to change adult behavior than it is to change kids' behavior. The same philosophical, psychological principles are at work in both instances. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to work at the Technical Assistance Center and really to have engagement with the entire state of New York.
Thank you. Thank you. Why don't we, if there are any questions of Kevin, we'll definitely take time after each one of the presentations while it's fresh in your mind. Anything you'd like to follow up on? Do you have PBIS in your systems or in your region? Similarities, differences, insights, anything what resonated with you about what Kevin was talking about? Similar issues, challenges?
I think just what he said there was very accurate. You must have somebody in the school that's going to support the program and make sure it is being delivered with fidelity, and the follow-ups there and the support is there. Because PB's great, all right, but you need to have that, if you have that initial layout of the information, and there's somebody there that's helping people throughout so that you can really understand it and implement it well.
It's true. One of the things we find is we only take 5 or 6 people from a school to train them. And then through osmosis somehow, what they've learned has to filter out through the rest of the staff in the school. We need a mechanism to get the whole school with at least fundamental knowledge of what PBIS is and what their commitment to it is. That's another thing we're dealing with. It's great.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks so much. It's when I used to travel the state for the state education department, people would say, what do you make in Albany? Meaning, what do you manufacture? What do you do? Well, this is a very clean environment. We don't make anything. And I said, what do you make in Albany? And the answer was policy. And we make policy. And actually, that's not only partially true. We actually make acronyms. The state education department, I mean, they got to have 100 acronyms, and they change them. Like I've been away for a couple of years, and they've changed them 3 times. So it's very hard. It's very hard to keep up. But one of the things